to the first episode of Women Techmakers in Israel. Women Techmakers started in the United States with the goal of increasing visibility of successful women entrepreneurs in the tech industry, and it's now rolling out globally, starting with Israel. We have Rony Ross with us today, which we will shortly introduce. We'll quickly start by introducing ourselves and then move on. So I'm Michal Segalov. I'm a software engineer at Google's Israel R&D Center. I work on technical infrastructure, so I mainly work on the Google network, and that's things that are widely used within the company, so it's not external facing traffic. I'll do it. Sorry, I'll start. Hi, welcome to the first episode of... Hi, welcome to the first episode of Women Techmakers in Israel. Women Techmakers started in the United States, and its goal is to increase visibility of highly successful women entrepreneurs in the tech industry, and it's now rolling out globally. We have with us Rony Ross today, which we will shortly introduce. We'll quickly introduce ourselves and then move on. I'm Michal Segalov. I'm a software engineer at Google's Israel R&D Center. Here I work on technical infrastructure, mainly on the Google computer network. Prior to that, I worked on YouTube, and prior to that, I worked in search quality. I hold a computer science bachelor's degree from the Technion and a master's degree from Tel Aviv University. And here with us is Daniela Raijman.
Hi, I'm Daniela Raijman-Aharonov. I'm an engineering manager in software engineering in Google's R&D Center in Israel, like Michal. I've been here for a little over 5.5 years. And my current group is technical infrastructure, just like Michal. We go back a long time. So my teams work on products whose goal is to optimize the way that other Google products use the Google network. I have a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in computer science from Tel Aviv University. And I live in the suburbs of Tel Aviv with my husband and son, and we're expecting another one soon. I'm very proud to introduce our first guest in Israel, Rony Ross. Rony is the chairman and founder of Panorama Software. Mm-hmm. And Rony will start by you telling us a little bit about Panorama Software.
Okay, so Panorama Software is a business intelligence company. It's been around for a while, actually since 1994. But what is special about Panorama Software is that right now, as a company, we're actually redefining business intelligence as into the new world of social, contextual, and suggestive systems. But first of all, let me tell you a little bit about myself. I've been in computer science most of my life. I have a master's degree from the Weizmann Institute of Science and an MBA from Tel Aviv University. And I was actually privileged to work in one of Israel's first high-tech companies called Cytex at the early stages of my career. And eventually I opened Panorama Software as a business intelligence company in 1994. And I'll tell the story maybe a little bit later. So about Panorama today. We have been in business intelligence for a long time. We have thousands of customers using our product. And about 3.5 years ago, we looked around us and we saw how the way people use technology is changing. People in the consumer world, in the personal world, use technology in a different way. They collaborate a lot with others. They're all in social environments of sorts, like Facebook, Google, etc. They all get systems who know who they are and know to suggest to them what they may like, like YouTube suggesting to you what additional videos you may want to watch, or Amazon suggesting to you books that you've read based on the books that you've read before and what your peers and friends have been reading who are with similar tastes. And we looked at that and we said, well, it's time that the enterprise systems will also take this angle, will also open up and change their way of operation to be more crowdsourcing, more open, more suggestive, more recommendation. But what are the natural, most of the ERP systems are very rigid and there is nothing much about crowdsourcing when you want to issue an invoice, right? You either issue an invoice properly or you don't. But when it comes to decision making in the organization, this is where we thought we could bring enormous value to the organization in enabling people to collaborate better with their peers and get a system to help them in analyzing what they need to analyze and suggesting to them better ways of analyzing and suggesting to them better solutions. So we actually redesigned from the ground up our original system so that it now is social. In what respect it is social? It really recognizes the other people in the organization. It knows what their interests of each person are, either by these people defining what they want through tags, or by looking at the things that they indicated they like, or tracing the way that they analyze and what they view out of the BI system, the things that the BI system in the organization offers them to look at, what they do. And the system knows to connect between me as a decision maker and the other people in the organization.
Panorama Software's latest innovation is about introducing the concept of social, contextual, and suggestive systems into the enterprise systems. These concepts that are so common in the consumer world, people, things like Facebook, things like Amazon, systems that know to recommend to you things based on your past behavior and the behaviors of your peers and your friends. These things do not exist today in enterprise software. And what we did is we took these concepts and introduced them into the business intelligence software. Now, the business intelligence software is about taking the data in your corporate databases and analyzing it and making sense out of it and harnessing it into the decision-making process of the organization. This is a typical business intelligence screen, okay? We look at data from the organization. It can be graph form or KPI or in a table format, in a grid format, and there are signs here that indicate that things work or will not work well for the organization. Like here, I look and I see that there is a problem of growth in Beverly Hills. What would I typically have done in the past was to call up somebody or set up a meeting or cut and paste this view and send it to others, send emails. In any case, I would have to do a lot of work in order to get these things resolved and find out who are the real people that I can share this problem with. What I do in this new type of software is that I click on the social bar and the system brings up the list of people that are relevant to this issue. System knows who these people in the organization may be. So if I am in my headquarters, say in Toronto, and this problem is in Beverly Hills, and still I want to investigate it, it will tell me that Yaron Deckel is the relevant salesperson to talk to about this issue. And what I can do is that I can drag Yaron onto this issue, and the system will automatically generate a discussion for us and maybe for other people as well, because we can add additional people to the discussion and create an ad hoc team that will address this issue and will be able to discuss it. They will be able to share what we view. The system will it will open up the same view to the other people when they enter the discussion, the same view that I'm looking at. So we are all on the same base page, and that really helps us tremendously in our ability to resolve the issue.
So now we have a system that enables people to collaborate on the data. Why is this important? Because there are many systems who enable collaboration, but enabling collaboration, just talking and just exchanging views is not enough. What is special about the enablement of collaboration of the data is that it makes collaboration meaningful and it makes collaboration useful. Part of the problems that organizations have today is they say, yes, we can use Yammer, we can use Jive, but we don't know what we are getting. But it's very obvious what you can get from BI if you enable collaboration. You actually get a shorter resolution time of issues. The time that it takes between identifying a problem and the time it takes to resolve it gets shorter. And this shortening of the decision window is very, very important to the organization. And the next feature that we introduced to the system, which we thought was extremely important, is the contextual and suggestive feature. This is that feature about understanding who you are, what your needs are, comparing it to other people in the organization, and based on that, making suggestions to you on what you may want. The system may either suggest to you who you want to collaborate with, it can suggest to you additional views, it can suggest to you solutions. This is a contextual and suggestive system.
So the system is social. It really engages the people and their roles and their interest in the data. It enables you to interact in a smart way. So it really becomes a social BI system as opposed to a traditional BI system. But that's not all. We took an additional concept from the world of consumers. We took the concept of a recommendation, of a context-aware system that looks at me and tells me, you know what? I see that you have an issue, and I can tell you that other people who had the same issue, they did something else that helped them resolve this issue. For example, if you look at this view, for example, what it does, it tells me that users who viewed the view that I just viewed here also viewed these other views. And this is a tremendous help for me, because I know from experience as a senior manager in the organization, how difficult it is to trace what other people are doing and find out what are additional relevant reports and views that exist in the system. I have like a list of 100 or 200 potential reports that may be helpful, but I don't know which one is really the helpful one. So if the system can recommend to me what other people thought as the most helpful view relative to the same issue, obviously I'm in a better position. But the system does something else. It also brings me similar workboards, which means workboards that address the same data as the data that I'm viewing today. So this is another feature from the consumer world that we imported into the system. And so our next generation software, Necto, is what we call a socially enabled business intelligence system, which is context aware, so it anticipates the user needs and automatically pushes relevant information in real time.
So, and on top of all of that, we also have a new algorithm that based on the way that people have been analyzing data, now simulate the way people have been doing analysis and provide the best results as people would have otherwise found, only they would have toiled a lot in order to get to this result.
This solution may seem very intuitive to you because you're used to it from the consumer world. You're used to it from your Amazon, from your YouTube, from your Facebook experiences. But these are not common in the enterprise world. The enterprise world is still following the traditional forms of the way it did business before, and it doesn't open to crowdsourcing like what we're now seeing. We are using a system which is all about crowdsourcing, about enabling collaboration, but the collaboration is not just collaboration like a Yammer or a Drive. This is data-specific collaboration, which makes it so much useful and brings a real value to the system because you're solving real issues here. It's something that is driven by the needs of the organization and helps the organization conclude decision-making faster, closing the decision window, which means the time between finding the issue and resolving it, and in a much more effective and in a better way, actually raising the level of confidence with which you make a decision and raising the quality of the decision. Just think of an additional example. For example, here I look at an issue. I can actually click and do cause and effect, and the system will automatically analyze the data for me and will do all these drill downs that people typically do in order to find out what are the root causes of the problem. The system takes this view that I just did, puts it on the side, and brings me 4 potential drill downs of the data that may provide insight of what is the reason for the issue that I saw at a higher level.
What I would like is to wrap it all up. So what we actually saw, we saw how we took a regular BI system and we opened it up to be social, to be contextual, to be suggestive. We opened it up so that it really covers the next step in the decision making of the organization, which is the step of, here's where we work as a team and make decisions. Now, we figured that BI would be the perfect place to start with this initiative because BI is the hub of the organization decision making. Well-run organizations have all their issues displayed in the BI system, which is the system that actually displays data for managers to make decisions on. So if you address and you make the decision making social, you get enormous value. So you get shorter decision windows, you get higher quality decisions, you've got better adoption of the system because you've got better ways to utilize the system. I personally, before I used the system like Necto, I would spend hours trying to find out what additional views or reports or KPIs would be useful to me in my work. Today I don't need to. The system suggests to me what I would probably prefer based on the way that I'm using the system, people like me with a similar interest. So it increases the penetration, it increases the proficiency of the users, and altogether it brings enormous value.
So it seems from what you're saying that actually within Panorama you use your own software as well for business intelligence.
Of course. How could we know what works and what doesn't if we didn't use it ourselves? And you know what? It wasn't easy. It wasn't easy to get to that, but we did. It's very important.
It's a very interesting approach which we also use at Google. So I'm wondering, from using it internally, have you learned something that you thought things were going to work right in a specific way, and then when you started using it, you said, "Oh no, this has to be completely different."
Yes, we did. We found a lot of ways which we found out that we really should be doing. That there is a better way of doing things. Doesn't mean that the old way didn't work. It just means that there is a new way to do things, and it opened up my eyes to see where the focus of other people was, especially looking at me, kind of in a higher position, looking and seeing, where the focus of the organization keeps shifting and how people, advance into analyzing issues, because certain periods of time you analyze profitability, and then you analyze sales, and then you analyze investments, and then you analyze percentage of resources invested in certain areas, and you can see how the focus of the organization changes, and it's very easy to keep up and be with how people do what they do.
That's cool. Do you also work with your users to get feedback from them?
Panorama, from the start, this is actually how we started. Now let me tell you a little bit, a small story about how we started. As I said, I have a master's in computer science and an MBA, and the one thing that I always wanted was to harness IT to bring strategic value to the organization. Strategic as opposed to functional or performance-wise. Because IT was always about enabling performance in the organization and about tactics. But I was looking into how I can really make a change in the paradigm of the organization, make it more competitive, bring out this competitive edge that is so important to each and every organization. And I got there by mistake. I set up my own consultancy company in late 1993. We were doing consultancy work. This was early Windows days, and what we did, it sounds amazing today, but we took systems that were in Unix, and we wrote them for our customers in Windows technology. So in order to convince a customer to do the job, we developed a small reporting module that showed reports online in a Windows environment for that customer. And we looked at them, it looked very cute. And I said, maybe we can actually develop a system that automatically takes any data from any database, all these databases that are hidden down there in your servers, and exposing it to managers in a way that is going to facilitate the decision making. And what we did, we developed a mock-up of that system, and we went around and we interviewed 15 customers. And we asked them what they thought about the idea. It was a small company, it was privately owned, I had no resources, this was early days, VC industry in Israel was just nascent, they weren't really investing, there were no other software companies around doing development work and selling, not even selling their products outside of Israel. So I had to verify that what I'm doing is really valuable. So we went and we interviewed these 15 customers, and we got amazing feedback. We found out that there are other vendors in the field. We found out that the customers really have very specific requirements about what they want such a system to do. And we also found out that customers thought that they can really derive competitive value if the system was to work according to their needs. And these needs were very complex. So we started development. We were lucky. One day we got after a couple of months, we got a phone call from one of these customers that we interviewed, an insurance company. And they told us, we looked at what you are offering us, and we think this system can bring strategic value to us, and we want to buy it. We only had a mock-up. We didn't really have a system. Well, luckily, they were a company who was just starting operations as an insurance company, so they didn't really have a data in it. So we said, you know what? We'll build a system according to your specifications, and you'll be our first customer. You have to understand, this is it. This is what we can offer. And they were willing to gamble on us. They thought that if we build a system according to their needs, they are going to have such a tremendous value that it's worth the risk that they're taking. The only caveat was that they said that they will pay only after a year of operation, of successful operation. So I had to make a very tough decision of deciding to develop and invest in the development of a product out of my own funds. It's not something that I, grew up thinking I'll ever have to do. And I really had to kind of put my hand in my pocket and pay for the people to do the work. The team was wonderful, and they really collaborated well. They did consulting in the morning and development in the afternoon. We worked nights and days and weekends, etc. And we were successful. We were so successful that the guy who decided on the product, to buy the product for this insurance company, called us 6 months later to say thank you. He was just promoted to vice president because he was an actuary, and he did such a great job in being an actuary for this insurance company that he was promoted. Eventually, 2 years later, he also became the CEO. So you can see that when you use the system right, if you do a good job with BI, it could change the whole strategy of the organization, can make a difference between a successful and non-successful organization. And I was extremely, extremely proud of that. But here I was with customer, so I went around, I went over, we sold the system to another customer and to another customer. And what we found out as we did that there was a problem, a technical problem that people had when they developed system like that. The way the systems, the other systems in the market worked was that in order to provide immediate response time to all these type of queries that people may ask, they pre-calculated overnight all the potential queries that anybody would ask. Now, Google would know a little bit about things like that. So you know something about pre-calculation. And that was great. But when you come to an organization, that has, dozens of millions of records, and you have to pre-calculate, you may get to hundreds of millions of pre-calculation, and it would be a very tedious and time-consuming process. So one day we had a breakthrough. We thought about it and said, well, how many decision makers there may be in an organization? 1,000? How many questions each one may be asking over a year? What, 100? So what are we talking about? 100,000 questions. Why do we pre-calculate 100 million? But the big question, okay, so how do you know which questions to pre-calculate? So what we developed was the first multi-dimensional engine, which is a technology we're talking about, that knew to learn from experience from the way people were using the system. and Google knows about that, right? We developed a system that based on the way that people were using the system, we will decide what to pre-calculate and what not. So we would indeed, sometimes when somebody would come up with a question out of the blue, it would take longer, but all the rest of the questions were answered immediately, and that one question that took a long time would also be answered very quickly the next time it was asked. So we found a way to create a multi-dimensional engine that was fitted the way that people were using the system, which is very much like what we're all doing today, contextual, right? So we developed what we would call a contextual multi-dimensional engine. So it was a great breakthrough. It simplified development. It simplified the life cycle of the system, and that was, that was a wonderful system.
Is that the technology that was eventually sold to Microsoft?
Exactly. Now the story about it is funny, because what happened is that first of all I went and I tried to raise capital for the project. I had 3 customers, a great technology, beautiful user interface, obviously a great story, a great story and a fledgling market. It was a growing market. You could see that people were very interested in the system. And why I wanted the funds? I really wanted the funds so as to start marketing abroad. And you know what? I wrote a wonderful business plan, and I laid it all down, and there were about 8 VCs, just new VCs in Israel, that were just starting operation, and I went and visited every single one of them, gave them a pitch, gave them customer testimonials and everything. And they looked at me and they said, this lady, she's not from 8200. The military intelligence unit where, most of the geeks came, today still come from. She's not an ex-pilot, so she doesn't really fit the model of a startup entrepreneur that we can think of. And they didn't invest. So,
do you think this has changed, or are you succeeding has changed that?
Oh, absolutely changed absolutely changed it, but it also changed everything for me, because eventually what I did was I actually adopted some business principles that made a huge difference to the way that I ran my business, and that really brought me to a situation where my product was extremely competitive, because I actually found myself with my back against the wall. I had no money to fund international marketing and sales, and I had to think what I'm going to do with my product outside of the Israeli, which was great. It's a great market. It's a great beta site, but it's a relatively limited market. So I decided I'm going to build myself up for partnership with a big player. I said, there are database vendors, there are ERP vendors out there. Some of them may like the product. So how do I prepare myself to something like that? I'll build myself as a company that they will think is valuable and with a product that they will appreciate. And the way that I did it is I decided I will try to assemble as many different customers into the product as possible, and I will adopt all the requirements these customers are asking from me. It was a very unusual way of doing business. It wasn't really, the best practice that everybody would tell you about developing a product. But as a result of these 2 decisions, we actually came to have a product that was extremely powerful. And eventually, after 2 years, we had a roster of 65 customers with everything from, the largest cellular company to two of the larger banks, and a couple of insurance companies, and a pharmaceutical and an education institute, and whatever, everything you can think of. And eventually, when we got to meet with Microsoft, it took them exactly a 3-hour demo. And after the demo, they took us out to lunch. And over lunch, the guy who sat next to me turned to me and said, you have great technology and a very attractive product, and it seems like you have a great team. We in Microsoft, we have great marketing and sales capabilities. Did you ever consider selling us your company?
Wow.
Just like that, out of the blue. And believe me, it was out of the blue, because the last thing was that I imagined was that I'll get a proposal from Microsoft, right? Microsoft.
To partner.
It's not a partner,
Yeah.
Maybe I thought, maybe they'll ask me to develop something, something like that, I thought of myself more of a small outfit. And I was scared, because we were actually working out in a garage, it was kind of it's a small apartment, small underground apartment type of thing. And I thought, they will see all my development team sitting in one room. What will they think? And you know what? They came. And they actually liked it, because they realized that if you have all your developers sitting together in one room, they really collaborate with each other. They know how to work together as a team. And eventually, this team continued to work for Microsoft for 10 years as a team, leading the whole BI industry within Microsoft, which was a great value to Microsoft. As obviously not a bad value for me, because whatever money Microsoft paid, I hardly had any any investors to share it with.
You were lucky that the VC turned you down.
So the scale-up approach that you took, do you think that the fact that you decided to focus on more diversity in terms of customers was key aspect, or was it the great team that you had and the collaboration that they had between them?
It was everything together. You can't do it. You have to have the team, and actually it was a great team, really great team. We had to have the know-how to what you want to develop, and that's what my customers really told me. It was amazing. I thought the customers were crazy. They would ask all sorts of, why don't you want to do that? And it was really necessary. So we actually learned from our customers, and till today, this is what we try to do. We try to learn from our customers, and it always helped us to develop better product. And the reason that we are able to do that, by the way, here we are sitting in Israel. Israel is small. All your customers, every industry, every type of organization is within 1 hour drive from your office. So it is, and everything is very open and very accessible. So here you can interview 3 customers a day, and this is what makes such a huge difference.
So it sounds like the customers are really key throughout your career, but how do you scale this up? I mean, I'm sure that you have many more customers now, so starting with 15, it must be easy, but doing this now?
No, obviously we don't do that anymore, I must admit. No, we do that in the respect that in the development, we have key customers that we integrate into the process, and we interview them extensively in the part of our beta program, and we learn a lot from their feedback. We continue to listen to our customers. Our customers are extremely key to us.
So going back to maybe a little bit outside of Panorama software.
Okay.
So did you always know that you wanted to found your own company, and what was your prior experience? How did it prepare you to being an actual founder of a company?
So it's interesting. I didn't really think I was going to be an owner of a company at the first when I started. I must admit that as a young woman, I had not very concrete ideas of career and where I'm going there. I was much less determined, as you would think, than based on because I was almost I was besides the term entrepreneurship didn't really exist. And the funny thing is that the first time I heard the word exit was when I overheard somebody say, Rony Ross, this is Rony Ross, she had an exit. I had what? That's what I mean. That was how, this is how nascent this was the first deal that anybody ever sold technology outside of Israel in the software industry. And obviously, naturally, the first time we did it to somebody like Microsoft, which was a very important, the most important partner potential possible at the time. So I didn't have this concept very, very clearly, but once I got there, I knew this is what I should be doing. I knew this is what I'm good at. And even though I spent sleepless nights worrying whether I'm going to make payroll or not, and even though I worked myself to the bones and I felt, like I'm bleeding from climbing walls sometimes, I just kept on doing it. And and eventually, for me, it worked. It wasn't very easy, really.
So going back to Panorama, recently your headquarters moved to Toronto.
Yes.
How would you say that affects the company? What do you think about startups in Israel versus North America, Silicon Valley, etc.?
So until 2003, indeed, Panorama specialized really itself as a developer, first developing the first generation, then second generation, but all our sales were done through partners, big partnerships outside, the first generation with Microsoft, second generation with Kronos. We'd never really ventured outside of Israel. Then in 2003, we could see that the business intelligence market is booming, and what we have is a real competitive product. So we raised capital and we opened up our headquarters in Toronto. I myself relocated to Canada with my husband, together with two other people from Panorama, to open up this facility, and it made a huge difference. You think that you understand the mentality of people in the States or in Canada who are your main customers, but you don't really understand it, both from experience, but also from actually going through being on different sides of the ocean. All of a sudden, when you found yourself sitting in Toronto and the guys in Israel, all of a sudden kind of on the other side, and other people in the UK and other people in the US, all of a sudden you understand what it takes in order for a company to really become global. What it takes in order to prepare your team, to support not only your customers, but yourself, each other, getting, sharing the know-how, understanding how to support each other, how to engage people, how to help them be productive. Made a huge difference to us, and and I can only say that if you ever want as a startup to work, to bring yourself into a larger company, you have to work for at least a few years internationally. That's my belief. I also recommend for everybody to go back. The weather is better, social life is wonderful, and besides, me, if I get up in the morning and I don't see big headlines in the newspaper with something that makes you, oh, my life is a danger, I don't know how I'm going to go through the day, Just a simple, quiet newspaper like in Toronto will never do it to me.
Like living on the edge.
Exactly.
Do you think this is changing? I mean, on one hand, there's more technology now available, right? There's video conferencing that's really good, like Google Hangouts and so on. But then on the other hand, there's a lot more competition, right? So how do you think these two play?
Well, first of all, it's true that there is a lot of competition. But you see, if you have creative minds, you always get to do something which nobody ever thought of. For example, this third generation, what we call BI 3.0, this concept of taking the social and the contextual and the suggestive into the BI system. The fact is that we thought about it, and other companies are just tagging along and are scrambling and trying to say me too kind of stuff. And they weren't there. So there is a low limit to creativity, and there is no limit to the way technology reshapes itself and reshapes the way that you're working. I can still remember a time before the internet, right? And I was there, and there was no internet, there was not always internet around. And now there is internet around, so it changed everything. And I remember a time where there was no iPad, iPhone around, and so, and now it changed everything that we do. And in 5 years, people will look and say, wow, we had BI that wasn't collaborative. How could we work? That's what I mean, and you don't know what is going to be the next wave that's going to change the way that we all live and interact in 5 years from now.
So how do you get a hint for that, right? You identify something that was
yes, exactly.
How do you do that? How do you get that hint?
I don't know. I can't explain it really. It's having the people. We try. We keep on. We have these almost every year. We have strategic sessions where all our management team and our creative team and our design team sit together in kind of a retreat kind of version, and we think about what's next. what's going to be what is changing? How is the world changing, and how does it affect what we are doing? What is the possibility of it to affect what we are doing? Because here, in first generation Panorama, was the big thing was Windows. The second generation, by the way, was the internet. We developed an engine that enabled internet deployment of BI. The first one in the Microsoft environment, and now this thing about enabling Panorama, enabling social and interaction. So it's something that the company either has or doesn't have. And you know what? In the process, we also made gambles that didn't work. There's no guarantee. You try things, and sometimes you think you're onto the very next big thing, and it doesn't always work that way. And it hurts, and you spend a lot of money. It doesn't necessarily work.
But knowing when to stop is another important skill.
Yeah. You have to know when to stop and when to change and when to adopt. It's very complex in the fast lane.
How do you choose which activities or which initiatives to be involved in? You must get a lot of offers from either from other companies or industry.
Yes, I get a lot. I try to limit myself basically to areas that I feel good with, that I can feel that I can contribute. Just being a dumb investor, can be has no value, not to me and not to the other. People think that it's enough to raise money, and bringing any type of money is helpful. It is in a sense, but the truth is, that if you bring money that can also have strategic value, and we get, for example, strategic value from our investors, we get strategic value from our board members. If you get that, you're in a much better position.
So your advice to someone starting a startup would be to choose the right investor?
Yes, absolutely. If they can choose investors who are useful to them, it will make a huge difference. Eventually, as an entrepreneur, it's a very lonely road. There are so many difficulties and so many hardships and so many issues. If you have somebody that you can really truly help, who can really truly help you, it's it's priceless.
Have you had mentors or people that worked with you along the way?
And as I said, when I started, there were very few people, who were doing what I was doing intuitively. But I did. What influenced me a lot was, as I told you, I started in Cytex. I don't know if you know, Cytex was started by Effie Arazi, who was practically one of the real first entrepreneurs anywhere. And it was always a model for me, what Cytex was doing. And actually from Cytex, I think probably over 50, maybe even over 100 similar startups, some of them successful, some of them less so, were spawned, based on, the experience that we as people experienced there. So he was one hero that I followed. But my mentor in my early career was actually my father, Mike Firon, who was a very, very wise man. I was lucky to have a person like him that many people valued as a consultant, as a mentor. I had him naturally, and I didn't have to pay for his time. And today, my brother is actually, my father passed away 4 years ago, and my brother is actually stepping up in a way and becoming kind of my alter ego, and trying to help me resolve issues that I face.
So I think that, the story that you've told us is really amazing, and the Women Techmakers series also features really great women leaders. But, it's not a secret that there aren't as many women leaders as there should be. So what do you think is the reason that we don't see more women in top positions?
So I think it stems maybe from the question that should be. The should be is a relatively new thing. Don't forget that until, 40, 50 years ago, women did not necessarily, were not really compelled, or did not feel that they have to become part of the workforce or take care of the social and economic future of their families. Marriages were a long-term affair. the arrangement was that women will look after the house, which at that time was very time consuming. No dishwashers, no no washing machine, etc. And the men were out there, kind of making, bringing in the money. These things changed. First of all, technology enabled the change. Okay, it made life, the homekeeping much easier and simple. It's not a full-time job. And we changed also the social and economical way that we look at the world by deciding that we want an option not to stay married or not to get married or marry late or do what we want. We wanted to control our own destiny. And it meant that both sides are no longer committed to a very long-term relationship. And as a result, it means that at least 50, if not more, I don't have statistics, but I think it's probably over 60% of the women will find themselves as the main providers of the family, themselves and their children, at the major portion of their life. Maybe all their life, but maybe major portion. Why? Because either they will not get married, or they'll be divorced, or their spouses will not be able to support them, and the work conditions change. I don't want to get into that. Anyway, they will find that their responsibility for the family is on their shoulders, and that means where they're going to live, which neighborhood, what type of house, what kind of car will take the children to school, what kind of vacation they can afford themselves, what kind of education, what kind of after-school activities, what type of universities they can send their children to. Oh, this is a huge responsibility, and we don't have it in our genes, right? All these years, it was not our responsibility, so we never really understood ourselves as the breadwinner of my family. I am the breadwinner of my family, and I have to make sure that I act accordingly. I don't think we had it in ourselves so much over the years. And it's something that changes. You can also see when you say to women, money. It's not me. Oh, yes, it is you. It is you. Money is you. So you have to step up and say, I want this career, I want this position, I want the money, I want the option, I want the perks. All these things that we kind of, it wasn't in us so much. We have to change this attitude to fit the new conditions that we are in. There is no prince on a white horse who's going to come and rescue you, damsel in distress, and and make life simple.
Were you always thinking that, or is that something
I
that
did.
evolved?
I was, I actually felt myself I was very self-reliant from very early on, and I became more so. But it took all of a sudden, I started looking around, trying to understand why is it that I feel this and other people don't get there as much. And I realized that this is it. We have an issue with money. We have an issue with identifying ourselves with our social and economic future. We have always that thing that maybe somebody will take care of it. It's not.
How important is risk-taking with that approach?
It's very important, and it's part of that, because part of the thing about, fortune favors the bold. You have to take risk in order to succeed, and you have to risk the fact that you're going to fail. It's not easy, but I don't want to see the world changing and all these all the lower echelons, the social economic echelons, full of matriarchal families, and actually you can see that in many respects. If you look carefully at the data, you will find out that it's true. So we actually have to build ourselves better, to build a career, to stand up for a career. And it's not just a career, not what I like to do, it's what makes money. It's what makes you successful financially. It's very important, because it's not just for me, it's for my kids, it's for my family.
So we're almost out of time, but there's one thing I really want to ask you, and is that's out of everything that you've told us and what you haven't had time to tell us yet, what are you the most proud of?
I said at the beginning that one of the things that I always had in my mind was to be able to bring strategic value to the organization through the IT. And the thing that always makes a difference to me is when I meet another CEO or a chairman of another company, and they will tell you, there isn't a single decision in our organization that's not taken through your Panorama system. This really makes it for me. Knowing that my customers' life and financially and strategically is made better through the use of my software. It's an amazing feeling.
So, Rony, thank you so much for speaking to us and telling us your story. Thank you, Michal, and thank you all for tuning in to the first episode of Women Techmakers in Israel. We have some more really exciting episodes coming up, and of course we have the Women Techmakers episodes already online from the United States. So, a good day to all of you, and goodbye.
Bye. Thank you, Rony.
Okay.